Number one, combating miscommunication. And so the kind of the reasoning behind this agenda item is that recently the boards had received a whole bunch of emails about a topic because they didn't understand some protocols in place with how things were on the agenda. There has been, other reports, you know, parents contacting the district about masking, parents contacting the district, uh, numerous items. And one of the things is we want to make sure that administration is doing these combating the communication um, effectively and efficiently. You have a lot of things to do, Mike. So we just want to kind of brainstorm on how we can make sure that parents funnel their concerns in the correct way and that maybe they're able to find out the information beforehand before ever having to contact the district.
No, I think those are all great points. Thanks, Ms. Barker. The two things that I'll bring up is one, on our website underneath Office of the Superintendent, there's a pretty comprehensive document families can follow about how to report a concern. But your points are well taken because I'll be honest with you, this is the first year, unlike many, that I have been dealing with a great deal of misinformation. Chasing down stories and misinformation on Facebook has now become at least 25 to 35% of my job right now. So what we do, Miss Barker, so you know, anytime we get that information sent to us, we think we have a responsibility now to respond to it. And what we can do is either follow up with a phone call or in-person meeting. I am not a big fan of social media. I think it could be dangerous. Now I know I sound hypocritical, especially as the district's lead behind our website and social media. That's why we don't ban it. We just say it could be dangerous. And what we're doing is trying to follow up with these misinformation or concerns through face-to-face conversation through a phone call, because I really truly think that's the only way we can alleviate this. I will say this, Ms. Barker, I know everyone's busy, but the hard part is I'm the last one to know about some of these concerns. What I mean by that is it could be posted on Facebook and 35 people respond before the district has a chance to weigh in. And that further complicates it. And think of it as throwing a pebble in the water. When you throw that pebble, it has a ripple effect. And what we do now, spend a great deal of time chasing down that misinformation and chasing down those stories. But that's the small part. We do have a lot of great parents who do call us and follow up with us and have those direct conversations. And for either of those who don't, they're still great people too. It's just, I think it's one of those things where I have to continuously work harder to build trust with our parents to make sure they know they can come to us. But I will be directly, completely honest with this committee. I have never seen a year like this where most such a large majority of my time is spent on following and correcting misinformation. So we think we need to do a better job showing people, families, the flow chart, how to report a concern, and as always, continue that direct face to face or at least over a phone conversation, because that seems to have a return on investment for us. And I think this day and age, a lot of people lost that ability to have those type of conversations. And furthermore, I'd follow up and summarize it by this: it's okay when our parents dissent with us, but we could do it with dignity. And we're grateful to have a lot of families who do respect that right. But you're right, it is a concern. You just turn on the news today or Google school board meetings, you could see a lot of misinformation out there. And we're working greatly to try to approach that and try to correct that. And I hopefully you see the results of that, because as you look at our last several board meetings, despite what's going on around us and across the country and in the Commonwealth, it's been somewhat benign here because we've been able to over communicate and plan with our families. But there is still that fear that you bring up, and that's the way we're going about approaching it. I'm not saying it's the best, but that's how we've really been handling it at this point in time.
So my next question would be, how much time does the principal? So if you're spending 25% of your time, how much time are the principals spending? Just looking at the chain of command, is one of those, like, is that being followed, or is that worthy to send out more information to parents of like, hey, this is what you need to do?
I'll let them speak for themselves. What I see, and this is from my purview, I do think it's being followed. I think the problem though sometimes is they're so interconnected, meaning one issue or one rumor could start at one building, but then have multiple effects throughout the district that now requires me to be involved. So I'll let Kelly and Krista, those who are present, speak to that. But I do see a lot of times they're interconnected. There's a ton of misinformation out there on different things, and they'll may ask a building principal question, then also follow up with me. But Kelly, Krista, do you want to speak to that as far as your level? I'll defer to you.
I'll start. Can they hear me on my?
I think you need the mic.
So one of the things that I do is just keep an open communication with parents no matter what. So whether it's COVID or not, the accessibility to me is number one in terms of community responsiveness. And it's the number one way to handle customer care, which is our parents and our students. But second is if there is a COVID concern of any sort, I refer directly to our health and safety plan that's also online. So we can all walk together in it, because the first way you divide a community is to speak a different language than what we're speaking here at even like the board level. So that's what I have to say about that. And I'm Kristen Savage, and if you can't see me.
These work, right?
Yeah, Kelly, you should be good.
Oh, sorry. Like Krista said, we have very open lines of communication. At least I do with my families. My families will reach out to me via email, phone call. I do return phone calls within 24 hours if somebody does reach out. We will set up face-to-face meetings, especially if there's concerns with any of our curriculum, because we wrote out a lot and there are some questions, but I'm happy to meet with families face-to-face. I'm happy to have phone calls. Anything that we can do. I mean, part of our role is also customer service. We have to ensure the safety and learning of children, but we also do have to work with our families. And so if that means that I'm calling a father like I did yesterday about a concern that he had, I don't mind doing that. That's just part of our job. Anything major, we of course go to Mr. Vukovic, Mr. Heinrich, about if we do have any COVID related concerns. Like Krista said, we do go to our school nurses, but I don't know if I'm answering your question, and I don't know if I can give it a time frame, but it's just part of our role, and it's what we do.
You are. So the face-to-face communication is probably critical when a parent would make a social media post about something, and then the school district calling to say, hey, this is actually what's going on. Let's come look at this.
Sure.
And now the question would be, would the parent then go back online and correct their original post?
That's not something, obviously,
That's-
I can.
it's not in
Yeah,
our
we
control,
can't.
yeah.
No, we have no control over that. I would hope that if we took the time to meet with the family and we answered any questions or took care of any misconceptions, that they would do that, because that would be the right and the kind thing to do. But obviously, we can't force anybody to do that.
Unfortunately, when a parent would make a social media post, you'll have 30 or so replies on that, and then that's almost like the pyramid that it just
Right.
keeps multiplying. Well, I heard this and I heard that.
Right.
The furthering the miscommunication. So Tamara and Wade, we're talking about combating miscommunication in the district, and how we've noticed that Mike spends a lot of time answering parents' calls, which is really important. But seeing if we can get a more efficient and effective way to combat the communication in the district before things spiral out of control. Is there a way to get a handle on things? And honestly, a lot of the, if you see a social media post, a lot of them are at nighttime. So obviously most of us would be asleep, or because our daily jobs are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Although Mike, I think you work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Probably, and same with you, Kelly, and Wade, and Krista. But any ideas on how we could get communication more efficient, so that it frees up more time, so we can focus on academics? How can we combat any miscommunication?
I would say that the meeting, that Mike had with the recently advisory committee meeting was helpful in many, many ways in that regard. Even the follow-up communications with the senior high parents were at that meeting were very helpful. Friday night, I was talking to a parent, social media, and she was asking me if I follow social media, and I do not. I said, however, my best form of social media is my phone call with you, ma'am. It was, very good to be able to exchange information accurately with that parent. Our nurses have done a good job of standardizing the communication, essentially, for quarantines, as well as, other information which parents need to have regarding, how many symptoms a child has or not, has been helpful. So any health related questions, our school nurse has been fantastic with answering those questions, albeit not always the most popular ones, but they do a nice job of communicating from the medical sense with that. We do the newsletters, occasionally a bright arrow we will send out if it's something specific. We communicated, we had a homecoming dance, originally planned for outside, and we moved it inside. The kids were all aware. I mean, we had to be the mask police for much of the night, but they complied. They did a good job. So I have not received that many I don't know, I don't understand. I think not only as a building, but as a district, we're communicating very well in that sense. And that was evidenced by the advisory committee we had here, which was a really good opportunity because those individuals were representing, segments or portions of the community. And I know the one communication that I had with one parent, she was reaching out because she was also disseminating that information to those parents because she became a go-to for those types of questions. So, yeah.
So it sounds like that activity, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we really had a ripple effect of good, of good communication.
I have so many thoughts. I think that Mike and his team have just done a great job communicating. And if I think about some of the posts that I have seen, and I have pretty much gotten off social media except for professional groups, like I really do not get on often to look at just what the community is saying. But the few things I have seen, I think that Mike has preemptively communicated that stuff. Like I saw something about the CKLA curriculum last week. We communicated. Angie did a newsletter about the success of our program. It is research based. Mike talked about how now colleges have to teach teachers the way we're teaching, like to include those things. So I don't know how that post could have been prevented. People who have misinformation. I guess maybe one thing is if parents hear something negative about our curriculum, about the policies, they should reach out to the principals immediately. Because we can't police those social media posts and respond to them. I think that it would take too much, but maybe we somehow communicate. If you hear something negative on social media, please contact your principal because there's a lot of stuff not true out there. And Mike, so many times I have wanted to post, like last week when I saw that or a couple weeks ago, I just wanted to say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story because it was a great story. I mean, it was 30 lines long and it was all misinformation. So I think maybe that's the thing we can, in the newsletters or other places, if you hear something negative that is going on at our schools, please reach out to us. Because one, if it's true, we want to fix it, right? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I think our COVID documentation or communication, and Mike, I'm going to say this again, and I don't mean to pick on you, but I really think that maybe shorter letters with bullet points instead of paragraph form would be easier, quicker for even the parents who don't have literacy needs, just quicker for all of us to read. But I think your letters have gotten much more user-friendly and better and simple and shorter. But that's really the only thing I can think of. I think we're trying to get ahead of everything.
And that will be the biggest thing is, people are still going to post stuff, but just trying to keep on top of it, which is almost a full-time job.
Is this working for me? Like, does this work? This is Kristen Savage, in case you can't see me. The one thing that I noticed the most about parent involvement since I've started this 7 years ago is that the more I got out ahead on the things that parents cared about, the more they felt they could. I mean, I see it as this. I see it as building trust because parents really just want to lower the walls. I work in the school system and sometimes I get confused as a parent. So I see it from the lens of, for example, we have parent engagement happening this month with fall celebrations. They care about that so much and it helps them feel connected. And now they get to come in and see our schools in a way that is positive and their kids are happy. But what kind of happens, not just at COVID times, but like before it was active shooters, and we had to be so aware of safety in our schools that we have to remember that their most precious cargo is coming to us every single day. And to bring down those walls is like my big vision, is like, can we show them more about what we're doing? So I had parents reach out to me at Horace Mann. They wanted to see the PAS curriculum. They wanted to see CKLA. They wanted to see our STEM lessons. So guess what? They get to. Like, that's their right. We have policies in place for that. But the whole thing is like, a child's education should be so transparent they can't miss it. And so we have family engagement nights coming up on the 4th. That's our first step toward that. We are letting them come back in to be a part of the fall celebrations, which parents can't wait to be homeroom parents for that. Those are the things that really matter. They just want to be a part of it. So that's how I see it. I never see them as my enemy, even no matter what side they stand on. They just have to be seen as, you have my most precious cargo every single day.
And Ms. Barker, if I could just
If that's what you're talking about.
expand upon Ms. Leeper's comments, because I think they're spot on. Number one, Krista kind of alluded to it. You know, I applaud this board for taking an approach to parent engagement. On November 4th, we are in district-wide academic parent-teacher teams to bring people in to look at our curriculum, to bring people in to talk about these conversations, because I think with the invention of social media, we lost the ability to connect and contact and communicate. Social media, in my opinion, when it was first created, was to connect with people. Now it's a place to validate information, and we need to talk and work things through. And they are our friends, and we do value them, because I think there's a lot of input. When you first hired me, I remember Ms. Leeper saying, make it a point to over communicate. And we've done that to the point I think sometimes it annoys people. I get that. That's part of the communication process, but we want to work with everyone. And Ms. Leeper's right. Don't ever let the truth get in the way of a good story. Sometimes we're just living in a polarizing time and emotions are high. So that's why we follow up with the phone call. To fight this on Facebook, I think our kids deserve a little bit more respect than that. We think when people go low, we're going to go high. We're not going to have these fights on social media. We're going to have them face to face like adults should, because adults are looking at us, or the kids are looking at us to model appropriate behavior. So we're going to try to do that the best we can. So we welcome that, and I applaud all the work by the administration for having this either face-to-face conversation, Zoom nowadays, or over the phone call, because I think that's the type of treatment our parents deserve, and that's the kind of quality of service we want to provide them.
So it's sort of a little bit off topic, but piggybacking off of what Krista said about getting parents in for the fall celebration. Years ago, we had way more than a fall celebration. When my kids were, I think, their kindergarten year, we had multiple ones. Since we're trying to build that community again, is there a way that we can do more? Can we do a winter? And I mean, we used to do Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas and Valentine's Day. I mean, and I know that there are some issues around celebrating those holidays, but can we bring parents in more? Especially at the elementary school, because that's where we get them involved, and then they will stay involved. I don't know. I mean, that might be a discussion for a different time, but when you said that, I just wanted to.
I just noticed the more we meet them where they really care, the more we get to the point of learning. That's what I'm seeing. Like the minute we started planning this, it's like, that's all they wanted to talk, like at least at dismissal, like when I would see like awesome parents coming to pick up, we talk about it and they said, hey, can you shoot this out to the PTA? Like, I think at the end of the day, they just want to see that we're all human, just like their children are. Like, I think the more human we become as leaders, the more our people realize the human spirit in each other. Like, that's what's happening. I see that. The more you just stay really easygoing with this. Does that make sense? If I'm saying that correctly?
And I think that the parent engagement nights are going to be just a really great thing to start building that sense of community. Teachers are going to teach parents how to engage with students in some of the learning goals that we have. So, for instance, in kindergarten, first grade, parents may not know much about phonemic awareness, but teachers are going to talk with them about what it is. They're going to show them games that they can play with their children at home. And then they're going to have an opportunity to do that in the classroom with the child. And if we have to do it virtually, then we're going to send materials home. The teacher will teach the parents what to do. And then at home, they can play the game. So I think that that's going to be a really big game changer for us. We're having 3 this year. And I do think that it's going to make a big difference. The other thing that, I can tell you the elementaries are talking about, obviously, throughout the day, we need to get to the learning, especially right now, because there's a lot of gaps and holes in our learning due to COVID and everything that's happened over the past couple of years. But we're even talking about maybe some like a spring carnival after school in the evening outside, places that we don't have to be contained inside, and that would be healthier and better and safer for everybody. So we're tossing around some ideas, but I think that we all have that goal, is to really get families back into schools, teachers and families back together, and children at the heart of everything.
That's great. And I don't think it all has to be during the day.
Yeah, right.
Just people come out at night.
Right.
It's things they can do with their children are always very high.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yep.
Terry, Josie, does anyone else have? Mike, of the calls that you receive, what's the percentage of parents versus outside community? So from people who are not parents, or can you tell?
Right now, most of it seems to be when the year first started. I'm not going to lie, it was all about the masking, right? That was where a great deal of my amount of efforts and timing were towards. Now we shifted more. It's all parents, to answer your question. Now we're shifting towards issues with quarantine and some of the inconsistencies coming down from Department of Health and how that impacts the schools. And that's been a lot of our time right there. Now, Wade kind of alluded to earlier where our nurses are fielding majority of those calls. Parents may not be in agreement or lack some clarity surrounding Department of Health regulations, and that's when we step in. But at this point, a lot of it's really been geared towards COVID-related issues, and that's okay because they're concerned, they have questions, and we want to address them the best we can. But I think where we have to reach a point, Ms. Barker, is we have to understand that we have authority above us, right? And that's Department of Education, that's Department of Health, and that's the governor's office. And by law, we are obligated to follow some of these rules, and I think that's where it creates some of the confusion, because as an administrator and as an administration team, our personal preferences don't really apply in this case. What we have to do is an obligation to adhere to law. And I think that's where it's such a polarizing topic. There's a lot of emotion surrounding it. And I also think when you combine that with the fact that people can't outreach as easy as they can to a governor's office, Department of Health, or PD, and they won't come here any Monday night. So that's where I have to have tougher skin and grow up a little bit. But I appreciate them asking for clarity. And there's been a lot of good too. Please don't categorize these conversations as good or bad. There's just been a lot of teachable moments on both sides that really work together, to Krista and Kelly's point, and we're doing that. And I think there's evidence of that now in our board meetings. So we see what happened. Emotions are calming down. And people may or may not agree with it, but I have to applaud our families for at least understanding and surrendering to law. But it's been mostly parents in most cases. And again, it went from masking now to quarantine. And there's personal concerns I shared with the board. The busing thing does not make sense to me. And I continue to try to seek clarity surrounding that. And we haven't gone anywhere. But that's what that does is cause a ripple effect, right? So we have a case, we have, say, 5 quarantines, multiply that by maybe 2 or 3 times the amount of calls or questions we may get, because parents want their kids in school. And I get that, right? And we also have rules that we have to follow, and they get that as well. So that's where we try to work together to make sure we can reach some sort of compromise, or at least understand the why behind what we're doing. And that's where, we're easier to contact than DOH in most cases, as well as PD. And I don't mean that sarcastically, please. I'm not throwing mud at them either. But I think it's just practical, right?
Yeah, the DOH is just a answering machine.
Yeah, right.
I feel as our school district has a huge step up, from potentially other school districts, doing what we're needing to do. If anyone thinks of any way that, a way to get on top of this, and social media and communication is ever changing. And so you have to keep on top of it. Feel free to shoot an email to us and see if we can help this flow better. Okay. I don't think any questions online. We're good. Okay. So number 2. Well, actually, can we skip number 5 and come back to number 2?
Skip number 2, go to 5. Is that what you said?
We'll come back to it, but
okay.
Kind of that draws into number 2.
Sure.
So we'll skip down to number 5, the COVID-19 Community Task Force, which is kind of where topics 1 and 2 came from out of this task force, with some parents that wanted to know more information about what we were doing with COVID-19 and the rules and regulations on masking and quarantine. And as Wade had said it it was a great meeting. I think it really had ripple effects to battle miscommunication. So if you want to briefly talk about that, and then we'll go to number 2.
Yeah, first, let me start by both saying a little sense of gratitude to the board for allowing us to have the subcommittee, as well as the parents who volunteered to be on it. For those who may not be aware, at a recent board meeting, one of the families spoke up during public comment and said, look, maybe we should get together and work on these things together. And the board authorized me to do so. We had our first meeting, which Ms. Barker and Ms. Blank were a part of. It was a great opportunity to really have those personal conversations to try to avoid some pitfalls that we've been running into with regards to COVID, in regards to quarantine, and as a way to work together, as a way to present the facts. And, I told you when you first hired me, and I'll stand by this position, the meetings are held in front of the public, not with the public. But that was an opportunity, that subcommittee, to have a meeting with the public. It was an opportunity to engage in dialogue, engage in some of the rules, look a little deeper, look underneath the hood about some of the expectations we have to adhere to. And the parents were absolutely amazing. They worked with us on being solution oriented. They understood our position, and I think they did a tremendous job, really helped communicate to families. And you were there, Ms. Barker. I told them, if there's anything else we're not doing, let me know now. That's within our control, right? Because that's the only thing I can't control, is the things that are in our control. And we'll work to fixing that. And it was a great meeting to really have some good conversation about the roles in which we have to work in. Again, I share some of their concerns with regards to quarantine, right? To me, there's some things that don't make sense. How it could be 3 feet in the classroom, but 6 feet on a bus, especially in some scenarios where the ventilation is equal to or greater than that of a classroom. But it was a spirit of cooperation unlike I have ever seen, and I thought they were wonderful. I mean, what were your thoughts, Ms. Barker? You're a part of it. I thought everyone was cordial, respectful, solution-oriented, and it was not a system or a meeting where we are fighting against the rules, because we were pretty upfront about what the rules in which we have to operate are, and they were respectful of that, and they worked towards solutions, in my opinion. Would you agree with that, Ms. Barker?
Yeah, I agree. And then number 2 came out of that conversation of, and we'll just go to that, is how do we communicate with our students? So something that maybe we weren't recognizing is that, as communication changes and platforms changes, and how students actually, when do they actually listen to us, or are they just hearing blah, blah, blah? That some of the students in the upper levels, junior high and senior high, maybe we need to think about our communication strategies. And so I guess, Wade, this will put you in a hot seat for now of how are the kids in the high school communicating, and how does the school communicate to the kids?
What we have been doing is when a student is identified, perhaps as a contact trace.
Maybe Mike.
Thank you. Whenever a student is identified as contact trace exposure, the nurse is given their names, they call them down. And then when that student, if they have to go through the process of quarantining, they will provide them a half slip of paper that has all the information on it. If it is a student who would go down to the nurse and maybe have 1, 2, or 3 symptoms, depending on what that diagnosis was, the nurse has a form that says these symptoms are the reasons why you have to isolate or be quarantined. We have started from the beginning of the year informing our students, all the teachers, that their classrooms are via Google Classroom in case they miss those days. So they have advanced knowledge that if they do miss for a time, they're to go to the Google Classroom, getting materials, resources, notes, etc. And then if they need to have additional help, then that time from 2:40 to 3:10 is available for those students. Every classroom has a Google Meet code, their code for the classroom. They can get on there and they can get help from their teachers. So there was a lot of upfront legwork that is done. And then whenever we have to respond because of a quarantine situation, information is also given out. There's a half slip of paper that describes those items that the nurses put together. And then there's also, I made mention, a full page that talks about symptoms and directions and what has to occur when a student is in home.
Do the nurses talk about academics or just quarantine with the students?
On that form, I think it's the last sentence, the last part on there, it refers to the Google Classroom. And any questions, those students have been told either through Google Classroom, or you can contact your teachers for additional help.
Okay. What platforms communication does the high school use to reach out to her? Like, I have a child in the junior high, so I've seen Mr. Edmondson and Dr. Minnick are doing it's like the morning announcements, and so parents can, which is really cool because as a parent, I learned about signing up for the pledge, and I told my kid like, hey, sign up for this. Don't sit around and do nothing. Go
Okay.
find something to do. So what modes of communication is the high school doing?
Okay. That which is not COVID specific, is that what I'm hearing? Correct. We have the morning announcements, goes on every homeroom. We have also called the rolling announcements. They are on the web page detailing those announcements as well. We will bright arrow students as needed. Like, for instance, our guidance counselors will bright arrow students by class to give them information. So there is a communication network established in that regard. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of just to see the different steps. So out of that task force was, students didn't necessarily know to log on to Google Classroom for their classes. They didn't know some of these opportunities. So some parents said, well, my kid sat at home, did nothing for 10 days, which I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure the student did do work. But sometimes kids need told things like repeatedly or popped up in their face. They might not hit morning announcements. So it's just kind of bouncing back ideas of, we know for the little ones, we reach out to the parents, and that's the best way of communication. The junior high is kind of maybe a mesh of parents and students. And so then the senior high, how is the senior high essentially hitting all the kids with, how communicating to them. So, I didn't know if the senior high was doing other platforms. And I'm not that up to date with knowing all the stuff the kids do, platform wise. I'm sure next year my kid will be in senior high and she'll have a lot to teach me. But so just kind of curious, how can we get better at communicating to our students? Is essentially the question.
I think it's a great question and a great challenge for us. The Google Classroom is communicated time and time again with our students. That's the primary mode or platform for making information available, assignments, disseminating information, whether that's an assignment base or whether it's posted as a resource. I said COVID specific, the nurse gives them, it's a half sheet of paper. It has that information on it, reminder, Google Classroom. So I know that information is made available. If it's checked to do a better job of making sure that they see it again, we will do that.
And so a thought just came to me of a student may be able to get into Google Classroom and look at the notes, but would a parent necessarily know? So there might be a disconnect of the parent making sure the student does what they're told and the student knowing what they're needing. So maybe that's kind of a disconnect there.
Well, parents can sign up to get like alerts for assignments that have not been turned in on a weekly, maybe on a daily basis, I'm not sure. And they can always get their kid's account number and log in.
Do we have a lot of parents that have signed up? Is it the
Thank you.
ratio for signing up?
Thank you. Yeah. Power School, which is our student information platform. There's a student and a parent portal, and that information is made available. Parents can get on and see the progress or record of completion of assignments, grades, etc. So that information is available through Power School and through Google Classroom. I believe that the parents also have access to that information.
And I think it may actually be easier for parents to do that now because we all were trained during COVID, right? Like many of us at least knew how to get onto our kids' Google Classroom and became somewhat adept at navigating, although I'm still learning Google Classroom. So I think that that might be, somehow the parents need to figure that out with their kids if they're quarantined.
If I could add also, at the senior high school, it was an outgrowth of our academic parent-teacher teams. We have a monthly series. It's called I Connect. The first one was late August. We did questions and answers for back to school. The second one was technology and communication. And the one we just did was student assistance program, social media, and safe to say. So that's another, we bright arrowed that information out. And what we've been doing is recording those and putting them on the website as well. So there's information on the high school website for those two.
It could be maybe directing parents more to the high school. If like parents said no, directing them to the high school website. I'm just trying to think what out of that task force where they, you know, it was mentioned that there was some type of disconnect between communicating. How could we brainstorm to fix that?
So I guess I see what, maybe I'm understanding what you're saying. So for those students who are quarantined, how do they better learn what they need to do? Maybe somehow in that information, just have the parents know that they can, in addition to giving that half a slip of paper to the parents or to the student, maybe having the parents know, somehow communicating with them, that they can follow their child's classwork and help monitor it during their quarantine via Google Classroom. Is that?
Yeah, that might
I'm
work.
hearing,
Just a little.
Is that what you're trying to, like, how do we help them navigate that? Is that what you're?
Well, so the kids get a sheet of paper. Do the parents get a follow-up email at all?
I don't know if all that same information is shared with the parent, but I know the parent gets a phone call from our nurses describing the process for quarantining. That paper is given to the student when they leave the school to share with the parent. Is that what you mean?
So maybe in that phone call, a quick reminder of, hey, this is where your kid's work is, to keep on top of it, maybe would help.
Sure.
And hopefully as we go further in the year, we have less and less quarantines that, fingers crossed.
It has significantly dropped off with the mask mandate, with that rule that if both students are masked and they're within 3 to 6 feet, that the student doesn't have to be quarantined unless they're showing symptoms. And for a while, what we were doing when we first came back to school in that transition time when it was mask optional and coming off of summer, I just think there was greater spread. There were large numbers of students being quarantined. And then once the mask mandate went into effect with the exception of 3 to 6 feet, both students masked, our quarantines, I just did contact tracing this morning for a student, went around to maybe 9 or 10 different classrooms, spoke with the teacher. Was the student masked? Were students 3 to 6 feet masked around that person? And then also, were they 15 minutes consecutively around each other? And we've been asking, okay, let's just pretend that people didn't have masks on. How many would have been quarantined? And I would say the average was about 20 to 25 each time that there's been a COVID case reported. But more often than not, it has been, well, this morning it was 0 for that particular student. But where Mr. Vukovic was making mention, it's the bus that's getting us, not the classroom.
Task force, the parents didn't realize the quarantines were all coming from the bus.
Most, if there are quarantines, it's coming from the bus. Unfortunately, although someone may have a mass exemption, if they're within that 6 feet, it applies. But again, it's just a handful. There's, it isn't the numbers that we were seeing earlier in the year or even last year. So the numbers of student quarantines has dropped dramatically.
I heard a noise online. Do we have a question online?
There's nothing showing on the screen. I'm logged into the meeting as well. No, nothing in the chat room, and no one has their hand raised from Ms. Blank. I think just unmuted though. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I had raised my hand earlier about how we get, because kids will, if they have the opportunity to take a vacation without their parents knowing about it, they're going to try and push the limit as much as possible. And Barb brought up the communication separately with the parents, and I thought, don't need to ask that now.
And Ms. Barker, another thing I'll reiterate: when we say the need to contact us. It's not that we're going to tell people what to think or how to think. We just think it'd be easier if we had a conversation face to face. There's a lot of parents, and we appreciate them reaching out, that we had the opportunity to explain our position, our background, or the rules that we should follow. That's what we want. Where it gets difficult is once it gets on social media, it gets amplified. And then you could times that one call by maybe 4 or 5, and that's where it gets difficult. So please don't think we're asking everyone just to fall in line and do what we say. That's not what we're asking at all. We're just asking, though, just give us a call so we can talk about it rather than having to respond. Because I don't know if social media is the platform for some of these conversations to occur, at least from the school district standpoint. And again, in fact, it's against our policy. Our policy is pretty clear with regards to social media. It's one-way communication, not a transparent two-way mode in which we use it. So that's why we just want to continue to have that dialogue.
Yeah, so out of number 2, I think that the biggest thing is that students know what they're supposed to do, but not necessarily the parents know. So just when the nurse calls, or if it's an email, just say, hey, by the way. So then the parents, because kids will say anything, to essentially get that free vacation. Just so the parents are in the loop. And even so that the parents maybe know, contact the nurse or contact the guidance counselor for the work.
Yeah, I think we always can improve. Like during that meeting, to add a little more context, what Ms. Barker was saying, all my letters go to parents. They never go to students. So that's weird, thinking how we can get better as far as communicating directly with those students when appropriate, because I don't think that's appropriate for elementary age, depending on the content. But yeah, that's something we're constantly trying to improve on and need to improve on.
Okay. Any other, for number 2, any other ideas? Okay, we'll move on. Number 3 is just a follow-up. So the school board has hired a facilitator to work us through our reconfiguration of our school boards, of our buildings, and just seeing what our communication with the community has been so far and the further timetable, just so that the public knows, a public meeting.
Yeah, where I'm at right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll defer to Mr. Kerr because he's the chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee. At the last committee meeting, SSI and Rodney Green presented the results of the survey work they did. The board then said, look, that's a good start. We'd like you now to put some numbers to that. I had a meeting on Friday with the elementary principals, and then today I worked up a draft presentation ready to go out the board after Buchard Horn looks at it. Really summarizes option number 1. My thought was, Ms. Barker, there's no need to go through both options at the same time. So I'm working on the 3 K-5 buildings, working on the pros and cons of that, an overview of what that looks like both operationally and academically, as well as financially. My goal is to try to get out to the board this week. So at a future Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting, then we can dive into looking at that data. I want to give you enough time to look at it, though, at least 2 weeks, because it's very intricate. There's multiple levels to that, and you'll have to decide what you want to do. So again, to summarize, at this point, the board has asked me to work up a presentation overview looking at 3 domains: operationally, financially, and academically, the pros and cons of 3 K-5 buildings. We met on Friday with the elementary principals, and today I worked up a draft presentation based on our work. Send it to Buchard Horn either today or tomorrow. Hopefully give them a week to get me numbers, because I know that was one concern that was brought up. Like, this is nice, but what's the cost? And hopefully I can get that to the board by Friday. If not Friday, then next week.
So,
If that answers your question, I'm sorry.
well, I guess the question is to the community, to parents, community members, what's the outreach strategy to let everyone know how this is going? Like, we know as board members to get online and check our documents, but everybody else.
Yep. Great question. I think it's twofold. One, I think the survey they initially did gives them an idea, the big idea of what the board's looking at doing. But secondly, if you go to our website, underneath our website, under About Us, I have a section called Current Design Building Issues. I never said I was creative, but that's what I have it titled. And what you'll see is from my time here 3 years ago up till now, I have a state of elementary buildings. I have in chronological order all the different meetings that have been conducted regarding this topic. So it gives the public an idea of a timeline of how this has been going on. I made a decision to keep the stuff from 2 years ago because I thought it was important history to have, important information to have, so people could say that this has been an ongoing conversation. But to answer your question, they can directly go to our website. I don't like to communicate anything in advance until a board makes a decision, because I felt at this time SSI went out there, solicited opinions, solicited them to do the survey. I can't control who does and does not complete the survey, but at this point, there was a good faith attempt on their part to go collect that data. I am then trying to give a chronological timeline on our website so families could see how and if it's progressing at all.
So is the burden of reaching out to community on SSI then versus the district?
Well, I think at this point it's been on SSI. I think the public has been able to come to meetings here and also visit our website. I think as we continue to make decisions, we'll definitely make sure we can communicate with our public. At this point, though, I think everyone, based on the multiple surveys or stories in the newspaper, know this conversation is going on and have the opportunity to give input. I think once there's something to communicate, I think that's part of my role as well, to communicate to families. When I meant SSI's burden was, I think, collecting the data for the board, not mine. I think that, and I don't mean that to be cruel, because that's what you hired them for. My job's now to follow on the board's request to get some more concrete numbers in those three domains, again, operationally, academically, and financially. And I think we'll have something nice for you here by end of this week or early next week with the first option. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Is there a reason why the district does not do press releases?
No, not at all. We could definitely do that. Only thing I would say to that, if I have to pick the other side of this argument, is I get a lot of complaints about the amount of emails I send as it is, and another additional email. That's one thing may cause some issues, but no, there's no reason we can't do that, Ms. Josie. In fact, we should.
I think
In a lot of
it's
cases.
something that would really help with the public. If
Sure.
you do press releases to the radio station and to the local newspaper, it might broaden the amount of people that you can reach.
Yep.
And I think it's something that maybe you'd like to look into.
Yeah, most definitely. And you bring up a good idea with the radio station. I have a monthly call meeting with the radio station. I also have a monthly, as I see it, column featured in the Indiana Gazette. Maybe what I could do is look at a little bit more at not the what, but the content, and put that in there and use that as well as another mechanism. I could definitely do that. And I apologize. It's been a little bit nuts with the COVID. And that's no excuse, but I can always get better at that. Yes, Ms. Lieber?
So have you mentioned the reconfiguration plans or exploration in your monthly talk with radio station?
Yeah, that's been a couple topics. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
I mean,
Todd Marino's a
heard that.
very articulate interviewer. He's good at it.
He's good.
I got to give him a lot of credit. A little shout out to Todd. I know he's not watching, but I hope he does, because he's very good at asking the right questions. It does a nice job serving up for the community and public in a well done way.
so really, we're using the email, we're using the paper, and you're communicating with the radio.
And most importantly, you can come to any board meeting you want and hear about it.
I think the November building grounds meeting's on the 15th. So like Mr. Vukovic said, he's going to get to us a couple weeks ahead of time, option one, which is the 3 K through 5 buildings. And then the plan will be going forward. I think we have a December building grounds meeting. I don't know if anybody has that scheduled, but then we would go over the second option at that point. Is that
I
the
would like
plan?
to, if that's okay with the board. And my thought when I told Mr. Kerr was, if you put these both together, I think it's going to get convoluted. We're not going to give either one of them enough time to really delve deep into. I'd rather go one at a time. That way, you guys make a decision that you most feel comfortable with, right? And I think sometimes, even though our meetings are 3 hours, sometimes we rush the important stuff, or we don't have enough time to go into everything. So I asked Mr. Kerr respectfully, and he approved it, that let me do one presentation, give that to you. We could talk about in public. Then I'll work up the other one. Now, the good news is the other one should be much faster, right? It's not going to be as convoluted as the first one we did. So we'll try to be able to do it. But that would be my recommendation, sir.
Then we would wait till a third meeting to then compare the two, or are we going to try and do both at that December meeting?
I think what I'm going to do is follow up with SSI, because remember, they're still contracted for one more community meeting as well. I'd like to at least get through my job as far as the two options, and then work with them to see how they want to proceed to have some sort of decision or discourse on the topic.
So Mike, you said SSI still has to have one more community meeting.
Well, it's a community meeting, but it's facilitating the
The-
decision-making of those options.
Yes, sir.
I think is the way that.
Of facilitating decision-making for the board members or for the community?
For the board members in front of and with the community.
And with the community.
Meaning a committee meeting. It's going to be a committee meeting.
That probably should be publicized pretty heavily, I would think. But I don't know if you could then. Like, you feel like you almost need a public meeting and then to digest everything and then come back and then the board really do its thing.
Well, they'll have the opportunity again, as they have all along this process, of coming to board meetings, coming to the committee meetings. And, they definitely should attend the November meeting. And if the other option is presented at the December meeting, then that's their opportunity to
Really
comment
come out.
on those.
Well, my suggestion would be to do PSAs if you're concerned about having enough community members come. Then do some PSAs, public service announcements, they're free, and they can go out on the radio, and the radio reaches a lot of people.
Right.
If you're concerned about that.
Yeah.
If you're concerned about not having enough community,
What-
then you can put it out on our website, you could do it with the
Yeah, and
PSAs.
Absolutely.
I had a parent reach out to me that they got one of the original emails about the survey. And I thought, oh, okay, a survey's coming, but then they never saw anything follow up. So they didn't see the survey, didn't have a follow up of what's going on. And so they're just kind of like, they asked me and said, what's going on? And so then I explained where we were in the process. But I don't know, that was just one parent. I don't know if there's many that are feeling the same way. They could be a little lost and people get busy. And then we also may have new board members onboarding too. So then it'll be more, making sure they're in the loop and they know what's going on.
Yeah, I have not received one phone call expressing a concern on having access to the survey, but if they do, then that's something they should bring to my attention. I apologize. I think we had it on our website as well. I think the email may came from me saying, here, go to a website and visit it. I think we sent a district email out to all the parents. I thought I did, but that was mostly SSI's responsibility as far as creating the survey itself, collecting the data, analyzing data. I didn't have anything to do with
So
that
the
part.
radio did they had a link to the survey and then the website. So if there's any more questions, we have 8 minutes and I want to try to finish this up. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, so the last one is interest groups after school. And so in having conversations with the community, and that's one thing with outreach, anyone has, you start having communication with the community and someone brings something up, you can always bring it to outreach meeting and try to say, hey, okay, let's have an initial talk about this. And so some of the concerns I heard was, hey, the kids, they're graduating school and they don't know how to do anything. That's just really general. But what they're meaning is, special little hobbies, little interests. And unfortunately, COVID's kind of, drug down being able to do a lot. But like a pick-me-up class of learning how to crochet or learning how to cook something, a French cooking class, like little kind of short, say, and Tammy Blank she's the one who kind of asked about this. A kid after school could stay after school and learn like how to fly tie, where an adult, a parent would come into the school district and teach kids. Now I know with COVID things are kind of with parents, but it's just kind of start the conversation of how can we teach our kids more than just reading and math? Because there's much more. Reading and knowing how to read and do your math is very, very important, but there's much more to it. And I'm going to let Tammy Blank elaborate on this topic some more.
Okay, so when I was in a blink and you'll miss it school, in elementary school, 5th and 6th grade, we had interest groups, and for 1 day a week for 4 days, for a month, we would meet and learn how to make a chocolate croissant using Hershey bars and crescent rolls. And by the way, I still use that recipe, and it kills. Another teacher taught me how to knit a cleaning mitt, and I still knit. But it gave us a chance to sample different things to see if we might be interested in it. It wasn't expensive if we weren't having to pay for it. The knitting class, all we had to do was buy knitting needles and a skein of yarn. And a lot of the teachers or parents that volunteered, they contributed and donated the stuff the kids need. But I was thinking that if we do that, we could do that and let the kids sample different ideas, the types of things, calligraphy, stained glass. We know that the art classes in the senior high have too many students right now to do stained glass work. But if we did an interest group for a few days a month, we could have just a limit of 8 kids who want to come in and just sign in and just try it for an hour. It's just a lot of, we could do so much, and that would help us get the parents into the school. It would help the kids explore different options on curriculum they might want to try next year or in college or even as a career. I mean, Terry is on the board and he's an architect, and you worked at PennDOT. He could be so, it would be so cool to learn how to draw up a blueprint. It would be so cool to learn how to read a contract. And those are also very necessary things to do. So I would really, 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 really love to do that.
Yeah, Tammy, I just got reminded when I was 18, I got drugged to a 4-hour class of how to write a grant. So in retrospect, it actually is pretty helpful. But at 18, I was quite bored. But so I guess the question would be is what are we doing now in the schools, and could something like this be feasible?
Yeah, let me look into that. There's everything's possible. We can definitely look into that and see what can be done on November 1st academic committee meeting. I am prepared to report out that we received additional funding for after school learning, about $40,000, additional summer school money, $40,000, and nearly $200,000 in additional money for learning loss during the school year. So my point is, let me think about how we can best use that money. That was a conversation for that day. This could be part of that conversation if you're okay with it. Unfortunately, I'd have to just go through the policy because there's always bureaucracy. Who cannot be around kids, who has clearances submitted, etc. But we can work on something and definitely do that, because anytime we can enrich our kids, I think it's worthy. It's a great worthy idea, because I know Kelly even talked about one of her teachers doing a robotics club at Ben Franklin. So there's a lot of things to talk about, and we just have to look at it and let me process it. But I'm not against it.
Oh, you could balance out the learning and an exploratory. Long ago, we did exploratory Fridays. Once a month, and that was a lot of fun. But it's what you're talking about, where children got exposed to things that we don't normally expose them to throughout the school day in the curriculum. So I think it's a great idea, and if we could work something out after school, amazing.
Miss Barker, I have a 1 o'clock with PD. Do you mind if I leave and step out real quick?
Actually,
The good news, it's Zoom, so I can go right there.
Oh yeah, so 12:58, and
one thing I'll just throw on this is we want to also keep promoting our existing clubs.
Yes.
And maybe that would be a jump start to this, would be, here's all of our clubs, here's what they do, here's when they meet, where they meet. And then, some of Tammy's ideas into the clubs. Instead of we don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to.
Well, it's true. But at the same time, a lot of the kids, they can't get into the clubs they want to because they're full. And this would give them a chance to explore things that aren't in the clubs. And at the same time, it's only a short period. It's not committing yourself for an entire school year or semester. It's just like a month. So you get a taste. The first taste is always free. Just saying.
So yeah, so hopefully think about it, and principals and administration who just left the building, think about this, and then maybe we can bring it up at extracurricular, and if we need to finance, and this could actually tie into social and emotional learning, because kids have not been together with their peers for so long, in that kind of setting of learning something more fun than the classroom.
Well, I don't know. We do have lots of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And see, like, I just thought of this,
Different.
you know, White Township and the Y may be able to be partners in
Yeah.
something like
Yes,
this.
yes.
Yeah. And
As
then,
well as maybe other community
Yeah, and we're-
organizations.
and we're
Maybe
talking about
a
like,
learn to skate.
Yeah,
Maybe
bowling.
learn to swim,
Yeah.
bowling. Sure, great
Yeah.
ideas.
so, okay, well, sounds good. It's 1:00 and we'll see you next time.
Okay,
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Porter, I'm signing up for the architecture course class, by
Oh,
the way.
well, that's
Very
tall.
exciting.
That's tall. I saw you in Legan.